like to welcome Ivana and Marissa. Ivana, I guess, the CEO of Terran Industries, based in Melbourne, and she's been in the field for, I guess, more than 5 years, and she has been working in sustainability for quite a long time, and I would like her to actually open the presentation for us. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you very much. It's great to be here. I'd like to also introduce my co-host, Marissa, who's one of our sustainability strategists and a brilliant scientist. And she could tell you a lot about marine biology and being a digital nomad as well. So thank you. So today we're looking into the economic advantages of climate action in business. So we've broken it down into 3 distinct areas to make it easy for everyone. So we start with an introduction to climate risk, challenges and solutions, and financial opportunities. So, climate action is largely seen as a cost to the global economy, and this is not true. The truth is worse. The truth is, if we don't act on climate change today, the damage to the economy will be approximately $38 trillion per year. The question we need to ask ourselves is, can we afford not to act on climate change? The potential for adverse consequences for human or ecological systems. In the context of climate change, risks can arise from potential impacts of climate change as well as human responses to climate change. Relevant adverse consequences include those on lives, livelihoods, health and well-being, economic, social and cultural assets, and investments, infrastructure, and services, including ecosystem services, ecosystems, and species. In today's economy, climate risk is financial risk. An example released just last week, floods have collectively wiped out $42.2 billion from the value of Australian homes. At least 70% of homes had their values reduced by flood risk. Businesses face the same risk. Globally, there are thousands of businesses with physical assets in flood-prone areas, and that's just one natural disaster. Amplify that by the other climate change-induced risks, and we're facing a global economic collapse. Investors and insurance providers are leading the business world in this instance. Without a science-backed climate mitigation plan, your business won't be investable, and you won't get insurance. Climate-related disasters have cost the global economy $3.64 trillion in the past 2 decades, an increase of 250%. The good news, however, is that investing in science-aligned climate action will create $10 trillion in new economic opportunities by 2050. One major thing to take into account when investing in climate action is double materiality. Double materiality is made up of impact materiality, how your business affects the world, and financial materiality, how the world affects your business. For years, most businesses have looked at impact materiality. It's never been more important to look at both, with the world losing trillions of dollars every year due to climate disasters. Double materiality identifies multiple types of critical risks beyond the physical environment risk, which is the most commonly associated risk of climate change. Double materiality provides a full picture of risks and opportunities, allows investors and stakeholders to assess how climate change impacts the business, regulators and markets assess how the business impacts climate and society. Ignoring either side shows up hidden costs, penalties, and creates a loss of market trust. So for the next section, I will hand over to Marissa.
Yeah, thanks, Ivana. Good morning, everyone, or good evening, depending on where you are. The topics we've talked about so far are really big and kind of hard to wrap your head around. So Terran's team has defined critical risks that all compile to create climate risk as a whole. And these 6 critical risks are separated into economic, supply chain, environmental, reputational, regulatory, and operational. And I'll just walk through each of those really quickly so we can get a better idea of what that actually means and how that applies to both your company and your clients. So for economic risk, this is risks to profitability, asset value, and the actual capital coming in. So for this, you can think of the money coming directly in, whether that be from investors, clients, grants, you get the picture. Supply chain. Vulnerabilities arising from ESG-related disruptions, whether that be upstream or downstream. And for that, we can think of material shortages or delays, regulatory scrutiny that threatens business continuity, and cost stability. For environmental risk, These are systemic risks that arise from both the physical impacts of climate change and the global transition towards a low-carbon economy. So some of the physical risks can include things like floods, fires, sea level rise, or temperature changes that directly impact your assets. Transitional risks may stem from the low-carbon economy, could be something like policy shifts, technological change, and most importantly, market evolution. Next, looking at reputational risk, these are risks to your brand, your image, your stakeholder trust, and public perception. The best example of reputational risk is greenwashing. And this is becoming a massive, massive issue, and with some real financial implications. For example, in Australia, businesses can be fined for greenwashing, and that it's becoming more and more of a risk for companies in every sector. Next, looking at regulatory risk. These are exposure to legal penalties, compliance costs, and policy-driven disruption due to shifting ESG regulations. So examples of this could be legal penalties, compliance costs for ESG as an industry and as a company, and country-specific regulations, especially if you're looking at shifting your company to another region or even expanding. Operational risks. For this one, you can think of the day-to-day operations of your company. And the examples could be anything from impacts from extreme weather, energy instability, or outdated processes that aren't resilient to changing environmental or regulatory conditions. And as you think of what each of these might look like for your company or your client, you'll immediately see that these risks have real financial implications, which generate liabilities for your clients and your company, especially as they're looking to either expand operations overseas or even just further develop the company. And this further highlights what Ivana was saying earlier when we talk about climate risk as financial risk. That financial implication is inevitably present in every single one of these, so it's important to address them as such. And also when you're thinking about these, you can very quickly see that there's overlap between the critical risks. No risk is siloed. Since they are the result of a systemic issue, there's inevitably going to be overlap. There is no individual risk. Like, for example, if we're looking at natural disasters disrupting the global economy, that's an intersection between environmental risk and economic risk. And, well, I won't read into every single one of these here, but there we go. Now let's talk about critical risks in practice. So to do this, we're just going to walk through a sample scenario of a potential client or a potential company and what that might look like for them. So for this scenario, let's think of a small consumer goods company ready to expand overseas, and some context for them. They've grown a lot in the past 5 years. They're a relatively new company. They notice a high demand for their products in Germany, and they want to expand their operations to Europe. So the company has a goal to reduce emissions and needs to share some statistics that they have collected the data for in the past, but they've never published any formal reporting. Straight off the bat, we see a number of challenges for this small consumer goods company. The first one being regional reporting mandates in the area they are looking to expand to. Next, we see sourcing from local supply chains as an issue because they're not going to have access to some of the materials that they have been using in their products, both or wherever they're currently situated, whether that be like in the US or in Australia. Challenge 3, resources for ESG data collection. If they're going to be expanding to Europe, they're going to have to step up their reporting game. They're going to need a lot more data on their current practices, increasing transparency, and also meeting some of the regulatory requirements over there, which leads into challenge 4, avoiding regulatory penalties. If they're moving to Europe, they're going to have to be CSRD compliant. So by classifying each of these into one of the critical risks that we've discussed previously, it becomes more doable to find a solution. So those regional reporting mandates, those turn into a regulatory risk. Okay, now we have a classification for it. Now we know how to address it. A solution for this could be a centralized compliance framework that aligns with multiple regional requirements, which is something that Taryn actually does. We've created our own impact assessment framework that is compliant with pretty much every global standard and certification, but Ivana can talk to that later. Looking at the second challenge, sourcing from local supply chains. So their materials are either going to be far away and might be difficult to import depending on how much data we have on those materials. And also depending on the conditions that they have with some of the partnerships that they have that are currently based in Europe. So the solution for that could be something like researching local material sources or looking into different partnerships with regional suppliers. Are something like tariffs going to be an issue as they're looking to expand? What are some of the constraints and restrictions there? The resources for ESG data collection, since they're going to have to be CSRD compliant now, they're going to have to do a lot of research into uncovering their internal data sets, their internal operations, just increasing that transparency from the internal perspective outward. To do this, streamline data systems that simplify collection and free up time, because that's not only a constraint for the company itself, but they also need to find the resources to deal with that, whether that be time, personnel, software resources, everything like that. Next, avoiding the regulatory penalties. This is a massive issue that we've been seeing across the board, especially as companies are looking to expand, because the ESG landscape is changing very quickly and it's very different regionally. So we've classified this as to economic and regulatory risk because it is an immediate economic risk, as those penalties are a very large and daunting thing. But some solutions to that would be proactive compliance strategies, research into where you're going, and minimizing the risk of fines and legal costs. So moving from risks to solutions, Taryn has a 3-step approach. We call it the map, measure, mitigate strategy. So for mapping, think of this as the first step towards internal transparency, understanding your company's current and previous policies, practices, operations, just knowing what you have to work with. For measure, think of this as the transition step from understanding your impact to actually doing something about it. Beginning with analyzing the map data, we begin to create a tailored strategy for what best suits your company. What are your needs? What are your goals? What are you looking to do? And how can we get there? Last step is mitigate. Using the insights and the strategies that we've acquired from the mapping and measuring stage, we paint a full picture of your company's operations, and we've reduced the critical risks specific to your company, placing you in the competitive foreground. And I'll pass it back to Ivana.
Thank you, Marissa. So our solution, as Marissa touched on, is a framework we have developed. It is centered around the 7 pillars of ESG. This double materiality framework enables businesses to financially track climate action, while also mapping risks and opportunities to our aforementioned 6 critical risks. Our framework systematically assesses sustainability across 5 scopes of engagement: awareness, policy, measurement, management, and ongoing progress. These 5 scopes are critical, as businesses who see sustainability as a box-ticking exercise will never go beyond the 3rd scope. Every indicator in the framework tracks progress using financial metrics, enabling businesses to quantify the ROI of their climate action initiatives. There are other ways to address critical and financial risks. Supply chain optimization and resilience is an obvious choice and a great, easy place to start. Supply chains present climate action's business risks and biggest opportunities. 3 key points are localize where possible. Localized supply chains have smaller climate footprint, less transport, fewer emissions, and lower likelihood of disruptions. Also, 3D printing components on site is proving to be a huge climate ally. Engaging suppliers on climate targets. Supporting their suppliers on their climate transition allows them to reach their goals faster. Monitor risks with digital tools. What gets measured gets managed. Climate disruption to global supply chains has the potential to cause $25 trillion in net losses. That alone has the potential to damage millions of businesses worldwide. Moving on to regulatory. Regulations play a key role in the climate transition. Advantages of aligning with global regulations include access to funding, improved reputation, winning more clients, and avoiding penalties. We have met several companies who have lost big contracts due to not being compliant with climate regulations. There are currently over 3,100 climate-related laws and policies worldwide. Here are just a few of them. Our scenario we're sharing with you today is based on a real-life story. An Australian company lost a big deal with a European-based client because they weren't CSRD compliant. These lost revenue opportunities happen every day. The other major financial cost of regulation is fines from lack of compliance. Using CSRD, the European Union's Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, as an example, fines can be up to €1 million, and depending on the country you're trading with, jail time. Due to the global nature of supply chains and the fact that someone in your wider operational supply chain is probably trading with Europe in some capacity, we highly recommend being compliant with CSRD, no matter which country you're in or what size your business is. This action alone will make a massive move to financially future-proofing your business. Now, I will hand back to Marissa for the next section.
Yeah, thanks, Ivana. In this next section, we just want to debunk this myth that is out there that it's expensive to be sustainable. Spending on climate isn't just a cost, or it doesn't have to be a cost. It can be an investment. Not only does it reduce your company's financial risks, but it also elevates you to a more competitive standing. So we just wanted to share some stats from the UN and the World Economic Forum that really reflect this idea of climate investments. So looking down at the bottom left, we can see 2 to 3% of cumulative global GDP is into climate mitigation and adaptation and could prevent 10 to 15% in GDP losses over the century. And I won't read the other two because it's just there in front of you, but it's amazing how much of an investment opportunity it really is. And in case that's a little bit too big picture for you and you just want some doable steps and doable examples for what you can do and what it may look like in an everyday situation for you, your company, or your client, here are just some examples here. Buy well, buy once, buy higher quality. If you buy something that'll last longer, you don't need to buy as much of it. Consumer demand. Consumers are willing to pay more for more sustainable products, and studies have shown this, between 60 and 90% for more sustainable goods. Risk prevention, as I spoke earlier about the 6 critical risks, investing in climate solutions today does protect your bottom line for tomorrow. Those risks, they're not just ideas. As we have said time and time again, it is real financial implications. And I'll pass it back to Ivana.
Thank you, Marissa. There. Operational climate investments take many forms. Let's take a look at emissions as an example. Carbon emissions are the most commonly associated cause of climate change. It is important to note that carbon is not the only type of greenhouse gas emission. For every extra tonne of emissions, a company's cost can jump by 18.5%. While this percentage will be higher for companies with heavy supply chains and industrial processes, it is also important to note that companies of all industries produce emissions. The best way to reduce your cost and your carbon footprint is to reduce emissions at the source. Offsetting or buying carbon credits will not reduce your costs or your climate risk. In a recent study, offsetting was shown to be only 0.3% effective globally. The only way to ensure real cost savings is to follow the emissions reduction hierarchy. Now, moving on to cost benefits. Here are some examples of the savings you can have. Energy efficiency in buildings can reduce global energy costs by $1.3 trillion annually. Energy efficiency is one of the quickest and easiest ways to start your climate transition. Implementing a circular economy in your product strategy can reduce your environmental impact by up to 7% and your total product costs by up to 18%. Circular economy takes some effort to set up, but once implemented, makes your operational practices more efficient. Lastly, retrofitting buildings rather than demolishing them reduces carbon emissions by 50%, while saving up to 30% in operational costs. While that is more relevant to building owners and landlords, if you rent the space you work in, the building you use is still part of your Scope 3 value chain and can affect your ESG score with clients and stakeholders. Therefore, choosing to use a green building is better for your bottom line. Finally, to finish off, here are a few key points to remember. Scientifically aligned climate action drives revenue, cuts costs, reduces risk, attracts capital, and future-proofs your brand. In order to do business in this economy, you will need to be at the forefront of climate action. Thank you. I'll hand back to our moderator.
It was indeed a great presentation. Thank you, guys. I really loved every slide of it because everyone being in the sustainability profession, they kind of know the risks with it, the risks around it, and the costs and the various mitigation strategies that you guys discussed is actually what is required by every organization. I would like to actually ask some of your personal experiences during your projects going on in Melbourne, Australia. Can you share some of your insights, how you were able to convince the decision makers to go for this kind of an approach and gain more by investing in sustainability?
With businesses these days, it all comes down to the bottom line. How we operate is we have a climate economist on our team. She's actually based in the US. So for all clients, she does the economic modeling of the ROI for the initiatives that we develop for our clients. Now, there's no standard formula for this. Every business is different. Every climate initiative is different. So that there's no way you can have like a cookie cutter approach.
I definitely can tell you that. I myself, I'm a chemical engineer. I've done my PhD in chemical engineering. So we actually work in industries, giving them sewage treatment, emission capture, and all of those solutions. So I definitely understand when you say that every industry is different and every solution is a different fit for every organization. Um, so currently, the amount of impetus that is being given by the Australian government for these kind of sustainability investments for organizations. Is there anything that is related to grants or financial incentives which are also given in this domain if clients or if decision makers decide to go for complete net zero neutrality for their organization? Is there something that is also supported by the government in the financial domain?
Currently, the main one we have for supporting this from the Australian government is a solar rebate. So easy for businesses to install solar, practically free of charge. So it's a great way to kickstart your renewable energy and energy efficiency programs. That's probably the only main one that's relevant to every business. The other ones that the federal government is doing is in the biofuels sector. So if you're in maritime, that's great. But that's a pretty small industry.
Oh, maritime, as in for the shipping vessels. If the fuel is biofuel, then they would
Yeah.
be getting some kind of a rebate. Oh, I get it.
Yes.
Most of the countries are trying to go for the low-hanging fruits, I understand, with the policies and the rebates.
One thing about Australia being an isolated island far away from everyone else. So shipping is a very big industry here.
It's the same for the whole of North America because everything is imported over here. They don't actually. I joke because it's a joke that Canada imports 1 million tons of tomatoes across the border every year, and actually growing tomatoes takes nothing. So that is the kind of consumerism or consumption of per capita emissions that are being emitted by developed countries. So that is how we are trying to address the problem. Of course, when it comes to India, when you say sustainability, people do not want to actually entertain the conversation because the tag sustainability, the decision makers think that they have to pay premium, and in decision makers in at least India aren't really ready to pay premium for sustainability or to achieve net zero neutrality and things like that. But in North America and Canada, the dialogue is quite mature. People over here are a bit inclined towards understanding what carbon neutrality could do and what technologies are lying in these domains. So one of our things that we do is we have a promise of making any individual carbon neutral in 1 year, any organization in 3 years, and any nation in 5 years. So do you guys also have such kind of a strategy or where you give some promises to motivate the decision makers to take their steps in this direction?
Yeah, our primary messaging and how we convince our clients is all around the financial ROI. As we've been saying throughout the session, climate risk is financial risk. And if it's not calculated in financial terms, then businesses will cease to pay attention. What we've already found, and one thing most of the industry is pretty much aware of, is that anyone who's doing it for ethical purposes has already done it or made a huge significant impact. It's everyone else's attention that we need to get. And finance is the only universal language that everyone speaks.
Definitely, I completely agree with you. I would like to actually ask if anyone would have any questions, and they can type it in the chat. We can definitely would like to answer any with respect to scale up of sustainable technologies, how the net neutrality for organizations can be handled, maybe any aspect. Because I guess Marisa has broken it down quite amazingly for us about the logistics, about the supply chain management, and all the risk management and things like that. If you want to actually discuss anything on that front, we would definitely be all ears. Thank you. Hi, Marisa?
I'm sorry, I thought you were asking the audience for questions.
I did, but I don't think so. They are typing anything in the chat. So I wanted to actually, I don't think so. They are typing anything in the chat. So I just wanted to actually know your perspectives more about the way you broke the whole approaching net neutrality challenge for an organization.
Yeah, well, breaking it into the 6 critical risks that I shared earlier, that's an approach specific to Terran Industries. As we were looking at climate risk and as this big scary idea, we said, okay, this is too big to address on its own. And this is a question that we were constantly asking ourselves as we were developing our impact assessment framework, which was, how do we communicate this to people who are not sustainability professionals? Because it's just this massive idea, and it's this what seems like a resource intensive process. Like, it takes time to understand your operations, to understand your data, to understand your policies, your practices, all that fun stuff. So how can we make it bite-sized? How can we make it manageable? And how can we make it understood? And that's when we really realized, if we want to speak to the decision makers, we need to speak the financial language. So then we tailored our impact assessment framework around that idea, splitting it into the critical risks, aligning these critical risks to the different aspects of our impact assessment framework. And then we just went from there. And then the map, measure, mitigate approach, that's something that's built into our framework as well, helping us transition from finding out the data, that transparency side of things, to actually doing something about it. Because everyone likes to talk about transparency, but in reality, it's just like a tool. It's the first step to actually making a difference. Like, yeah, we can have BP or Shell being the most transparent companies in the world, but at the end of the day, they're still oil and gas companies. Transparency isn't everything. It's just a step towards the right direction.
That is great to know. That is an amazing approach which you just mentioned. With respect to the life cycle assessment of it, I do have some experience, because I've done the life cycle assessment for PET bottles for the Complete India Perspective for the Plastic Manufacturing Lobby, PET Association for Clean Environment, and I do also have a chapter about it. But when it comes to assessment, I completely understand that the organization can go ahead with reporting and the whole framework with strategies and things like that. But with respect to getting the actual net neutrality, what kind of solutions do you guys suggest, or would it be depending on the industry? Because something that we normally try to do is, if it is a emission intensive industry, then we definitely try and capture the emissions first. And the main thing is to actually offset the energy resource to a bio fuel resource. So that is how we try to do it. Do you guys also follow any of these kind of solutions, or it depends on the client?
Everything is very client dependent at the end of the day, but that's how we developed our framework. It's modular by design. So we start with a short assessment so we can identify where the critical risks are. So once we've identified what the biggest pain points are, then we modularize our framework to start with their biggest risk. And as you said, for heavy industries, it is often the industrial processes, energy intensiveness, and emissions factors there. So we will start by looking at easy, quick swaps. What's the shortest, quickest win we can implement to show ROI? That's something that will not only incentivize the team, come across as a good motivator and a short win for everyone, while also showing lower costs. And often the times it's the small little supply chain swaps that do the biggest impact to start with. So they can show an immediate reduction in both emissions, climate footprint, and financial investment.
Yeah, just expanding on that as well. Something that we really like to emphasize is that your sustainability story isn't just your emissions story. Greenhouse gas emissions, yeah, they're huge, and it's very important, and it's something that everybody likes to talk about. But because it's talked about so much, it often overshadows a lot of the other issues that we're also looking to tackle. For example, waste. That's a big one as well, on top of the social issues that are arising both in your supply chain and could even be in your company's operations that you just don't know about. So these are all different things that we're trying to address in this impact assessment framework. And yeah, I just mentioned that because it's something that gets overlooked so much of the time, especially when we're talking about neutrality. And I feel like everyone likes to say, like, oh, we're trying to be neutral. And so much of the time, the assumption is around emissions. But what does neutrality actually mean? Are we talking about carbon neutrality? Because that's one thing. But if we're talking about neutrality in general, it expands to way more than just emissions.
And that's precisely why everyone's heard of the word carbon footprint. You might notice in the presentation today, I use the word climate footprint. So climate change, climate action, it's beyond carbon. That's one of the biggest examples of greenwashing is carbon tunnel vision. So focused on reducing just your carbon that you forget about everything else to actually mitigate the climate risks in your operations.
Yeah. People translate their chemical footprint to carbon footprint, and they think that if they now invest only in fixing the carbon, then it is actually a the solution, but it's not the solution. Like you said, that it extends to different chemicals, it extends to different kind of neutralities, different environmental burdens. I mean, like when you do some kind of impact assessment, there would be 14 to 15 parameters that you judge: midpoint assessment, endpoint assessment, and then you would understand, okay, these are the pain points or these are the pinch points, and then you would be able to give a sustainable strategy. But that is what actually ticked us in introducing two technologies, which, like Marissa explained, a very big pain point for everyone around the world is waste. And we have a technology where we do emissionless pyrolysis. We capture emissions in situ while we do the pyrolysis of the waste. And this is completely against where people try and give waste to energy, because if you give waste to energy, it's like, again, you are using waste, which is a product of fossil fuel, which is again considered as a fossil fuel. So it's just like burning coal to get energy out of waste. So we rather focus on actually disposing the waste sustainably rather than getting energy out of it. And so yeah, sometimes it gets frustrating just to see people who use words about carbon neutrality and not actually do anything on ground. So we definitely want to do that, and that is why we have introduced some products and things like that.
And that's one thing we refer to. Looking at the media and everything that they're producing at the moment, it's something we refer to as accidental greenwashing. Like, they might not, not everyone can be an expert in sustainability. That's why we exist. Like, everyone has their own field of specialities. That's how the global economy was created. That's how it is. But the media is commonly using terms like net zero, and that's happening in every country. And if they don't know, that people don't know what they don't know, so they just use the term net zero because they associate it with, okay, we have to do something with sustainability. They don't know anything beyond that because they haven't been told, they haven't been educated, and that's not a fault on their behalf. That is partially the fault of the media. It's like they're producing these terms which are often miscommunicated or misunderstood. It's what the government uses to set their standards. Like, okay, we have to call it something, but it's important for people like us to educate it as well. Like, okay, yes, net zero is a great start. That's what all the global politicians are calling it to start with, but we need to help everyone move beyond that term.
Absolutely, I agree with you. You resonate whenever you say things like that with me, because it is a global dialogue that is supposed to be maneuvered in a way that will amount to a local change, and that too not by using these words which will in the end become repetitive and then lose its value. So definitely, people should work more on actually replacing the resources which are a bit towards the bio side. Look at their emissions, look at their water footprint, and that itself kind of solves most of the problem. Then the material aspect of it comes in picture, and but it's really great that Terran Industries was able to put everything in a way that it became easy for everyone to understand how this complicated problem can be solved easily. Apart from the same, would you like to also share some of your experiences through your journey as Terran Industries in Melbourne, Australia?
Share our journey.
Share some experiences in the sustainability industry with clients, or something that is on top of your head about any projects that you're currently doing and things like that.
No. For confidentiality, we can't actually share any client stories at this stage.
But, that's all right. We just had 15 more minutes, so I thought that if you would want.
Yeah, no, that's fine. But we love what we do. We set up this company because we believe in a sustainable, ethical future, and we just want to help. We understand that climate change can be confusing. There's all these terms like net zero. Okay, what does net zero actually mean? Carbon neutrality. What does carbon neutrality actually mean? So being able to help people through that is our biggest motivator. And I might be located in Melbourne, Australia. Marissa currently is. When I first met her, when she joined the team, she was in a different time zone every other week. So we're 100% remote. That's part of our culture, and that's what we adopt, because climate change doesn't acknowledge country borders. Like, a glacier is not going to stop melting when it reaches a political boundary. Climate change is a global problem. It can't be solved by localized solutions. But at the same time, every region is different, and we need local input to be able to solve the global problem.
Yes, I definitely agree with it. And something of that initiative you started in Canada, because half of the forest is being burned for no reason, and I guess the smoke has reached till Europe. So through different such missions, we're trying to introduce some biopolicies which are based on life cycle assessment data and things like that, which will help in also changing the dialogue about such catastrophes and bringing it into the mainstream energy domain, where people think of it as an energy substitute rather than just a calamity. So there are multiple things that can happen on local fronts, on local grassroots level, which is going to amount to actual change. Otherwise, the COP conferences themselves have their own carbon footprint now, which is a carbon footprint because it's absolutely 39 years that people are flying to a central facility. It's better to hop on a Zoom call and talk to our colleagues in whichever time zone they are in, rather than hopping on a jet and discussing futile discussions which actually amount to nothing. So
I completely agree. Australia has put their bid in for the COP summit next year, and there's a small but steady movement here for Australia not to have it, solely because it's going to take the amount of missions and other climate footprints going to take for every diplomat across the world to come to Australia. That seems rather counterproductive.
So that is why, as a group of chemical engineers, we think that it's a creative engineer's problem to solve the sustainability problem right now, and not the. It doesn't require a goal of 2030 and 2050 like people try to get it in the dialogue. So we are actually having a global publicity stunt called projectdroplet.com. Do check us out, where we are making a solar-powered drone boat to circumnavigate Earth autonomously, just to show that things you can buy off Amazon can make you sustainable right now, giving a template where we can decentralize things like sewage treatment, waste treatment, and things like that, giving the power to the people rather than with the central governments. Because as we see, the more we depend on them, the more they fail us. So it's better that people can associate themselves with technologies and things by which they are able to mitigate their own carbon footprint, and not just pass on the blame to people and then think that things will get solved.
You touch on two key points there, which are very close to us. And one is basically the technology today already exists. It's not just SaaS solutions and technology tracking programs, but physical hardware and product replacements. There's thousands of them that already exist. And that's why one of the services we do is supplier matchmaking, because no one can know everything that's out there. And there's hundreds of options. Like there's even two direct competitors, suppliers. How do you know which one's going to be the best for you? So that's a major thing that we do, and it's something that's hugely important for everyone to know, is that the technology does exist. It just needs to be implemented.
Yeah.
And secondly, what you touched on there, the political side of it, and that's another reason we lean in completely to the economic messaging and the economic benefits, because politicians, to some extent, are a barrier to climate action. Sometimes they're supportive, sometimes they're not. So the next election that may change. It's constantly in a state of flux. But everyone speaks the language of economics, especially politicians. So it's something that the more we can put on the economic benefits of it, the more incentive for a broad term, using climate deniers just for the sake of it, they speak economics. It's the one thing they can definitely understand. So the more we put on the economic benefits of sustainability, the more leverage we will get and the better uptake we will get from everyone.
It's funny when you explained it in the form of finance and monetary perspective to decision makers. I actually would like to share an experience where we were consulting an ethanol company, and they also had a animal feed industry, which was their allied industry. And one of the key food ingredients they used to import from Thailand, which actually would be imported from China for India, Thailand just being the face. But we actually isolated that ingredient from a waste stream from the ethanol industry, and we were able to close that overseas import that was happening for that particular thing. So those kind of initiatives, if you are able to present in front of the decision makers, not telling them about the sustainability aspect, but about the actual financial perspective that they are able to gain from their own waste rather than importing. So those kind of things actually help, I feel. And it has been really a funny journey for at least us. We were able to complete around 20-25 projects in India, and now we've got around 2 in Canada, where we are actually doing direct air capture of CO2 and turning it into dry ice. So dry ice being one of the key ingredients for refrigeration and for most of the cold chain supply chain logistics. there's a big client over here who approached us with that problem, and we were able to deliver such kind of a system by which we are able to capture direct CO2 from the air and do it. But you, of course, would require to educate the decision maker in that aspect, not in the sustainability point of view, but from the economic point of view, that you are able to, like you said, 3D printing on site is a very good solution to actually not get things on site resources. You reduce the transportation and everything. So those kind of initiatives do help a lot in explaining decision makers.
Yeah, absolutely. And with the advancements in 3D printing at the moment, there's no reason not to take up that solution.
Definitely.
Yeah, I love keeping up to date with scientific technologies, and seeing the advancements in 3D printing recently has been quite exciting, to be honest.
Absolutely. One of my colleagues, actually, he works with Rice University in Sweden for 3D printing. He works he's the head of the lab, which is currently doing the cutting edge 3D printing of concrete models for various prototypes. They have got some really amazing things going on, and it just mesmerizes me. I just cannot believe that they are doing this out of concrete. And now most of the things, if we are able to just fix the concrete in a sustainable way, we would be able to get a good solution out of it. So that is a really good takeaway for me from 3D printing.
Absolutely.
Well,
we have a very quiet audience. There's no questions.
I guess we still have 5 minutes left, and if anyone would want to ask any specific questions or anything which they would be curious from a global perspective, it is a really good panel, I guess, because you yourself having a complete experience in Australia and most of the other continents, and me having some small experience in India. That is a combined way we can actually answer if anyone would have any questions.
Come on, I'll challenge one of you to ask one question. Come on. There's 6 of you online.
If not, I think it's okay if we end a bit early, give some people some time back.
Yeah. But it's been amazing chatting with you guys. Thank you so much for your time, and really looking forward to actually connecting with you and sharing some of our information, as well as having more of your information, because it really helped me understand to put things in perspective for decision makers. And looking forward to connecting with you. I hope I'm not able to see any new questions, so it's safe to actually end the chat, end the live stream on this note. And
all right, well, thank you everyone for being here.
Thank you, Ivana. Thank you, Marissa. Thank you for presenting us about Terran Industries and giving us good perspective about sustainability.